I got it. So yeah, I said we're going to be talking about heavy burdens. Anybody like heavy burdens? No, we like the light stuff, the easy stuff. As we step into the week 2 of our summer journey, we're confronting a silent epidemic that runs rampant through our neighborhood, our workplaces, even our church pews. The exhaustion of performance fatigue. The exhaustion of performance fatigue. We live in a culture that worships tracking metrics. We can be tempted to measure our worth by our productivity, our relational compliance, our packed calendars, the curated perfection of our families. We're told from a very young age that what you are what you achieve. And if you stop running, you're going to fall behind. It can lead to a specific crushing weight, the unearned guilt or chronic shame, a haunting internal whisper that says, no matter how much you did today, what's the next 3 words? It wasn't enough. No matter how much you did today, it wasn't enough. You should be doing more. You should be being more. You should be fixing more. You should be more. To cope with the internal deficit, we act as our own taskmasters. We pile expectation after expectation onto our shoulders. We run on empty fuel of self-reliance until our bodies, our minds, our spirits, they just simply burn out. We become highly functional, but deeply exhausted managers of a life that we were never designed to carry. And what's the last word? Alone. Life has life. There's things that you need to do, but life is meant to be journeyed with God, not carried alone. The gospel is not a call to work harder for God's approval. Do you really trust that? The good news is that it's not for you to work harder for God's approval. It's an invitation to work from God's approval. Don't confuse the heavy legalistic burdens of self-reliance with the grace-paced yoke of Jesus Christ. That's what we're talking about today. How do we know what burdens to carry and which ones to share, and how does God offer to direct us? So to understand why Jesus uses that imagery of a yoke, we have to look at the religious and the agricultural landscape of the first century. So that's an oxen yoke, right? Makes sense. You put 2 of them in it. Two, you can do more than one. They can pull a plow. They work together. You use an older one and a younger one. We'll talk more about that in the communion thought. But did you know that as he used the idea of a yoke, there's another yoke that they had in mind as well? And that is the rabbinical teaching. The common phrase for the law was the yoke. The burden of carrying 613 laws everywhere you went. So there is a sense that not only is he using the agricultural imagery, but he's also saying you're carrying the burden of the law in a way that you weren't intended to. That performance metric. So for an object lesson, I was going to have sheep, goats, but I thought we better not do that. Bringing animals in isn't a good idea. So we're going to illustrate this a little differently. Here's the passage, because it's one that you know well, from Matthew 11, 28 to 30. But slow down. Slow down and take a look what he's really saying in here. None of this is wasted words. Come to me. Is that important? Who has the responsibility of action? You do. You could choose to come to Jesus or not come to Jesus. But the rest of the promise in the passage is null and void if you don't do part 1. What he says is, come to me. And who are the ones that want to come to him? All you who are weary and burdened. Know anybody in your life that would consider themselves weary or burdened? Overworked, overtaxed, frustrated? Just too much. There's just too much. But why is part 1 important? We know people that are in this part, all you who are weary and burdened, but are we helping them come to Jesus? And it's okay. It's expected that you're also one who is weary and burdened, right? You don't have to have it all together. You can be weary and burdened. God knows that. But come to me, and what's the promise? Jesus, I will give you rest. Part 1 and part 2 are important. How does he give you rest? Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Well, that seems like a funny way to rest. Add one more burden, one more thing. Strap this onto you. But when you do that, when you tie yourself to Jesus, he will give you rest. And learn from me. Who's a better example of how to handle a life that's weary and burdening than Jesus? No one. Learn from him. How did he manage that? How did he take on his responsibility? And can we trust him? I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your body. None of these are wasted words. You're going to find rest at the most important place where you're seeking rest. Your body may be fatigued. Your mind may get tired. You can get frustrated, but you will have rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. The law, that yoke, just gave more responsibilities. Law after law after law after law. And if you did this right, you failed at that one. And then this one and that one. It was always more burdens. And God knows that. And so in Galatians, the struggle is they were going back to the law, adding the law along with the grace of Jesus. And he uses the yoke imagery there in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. It says, it is for freedom that Christ has set you free. Right? You're free from, in particular, the yoke of the law. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Christ has freed you from that bond. Paul explicitly links legalism and self-reliance to slavery, sinking back into performance metrics, enslaving yourself to a debt you can't pay. Because what good things do you put in to offset your bad things? Well, in the law, there was nothing good to honor God. You just had to make payment for bad. So you're always adding to the negative. You could never remove from it, even with the sacrificial system. Is that the only time he talks about a yoke? Well, way back in Isaiah 58:6, God defines the true heart of the kingdom through the prophet Isaiah. They got messed up in all kinds of things, and he says, it is not the kind of fasting I have chosen to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. So again, they were trying to use the law to enslave one another. And God says, that's not the fasting. The stuff that you should be leaving behind and not participating in are injustice, oppression. Just free people up to serve God. Legalism doesn't do that. True? Legalism does not free people to serve God. It enslaves them to and adds another yoke. So what about self-imposed legalism? You're adding yourself a yoke. Jesus is the best example. When Jesus steps into our exhaustion, he doesn't offer a vacation or a break from our schedules. He says, I'll give you rest when you take on this collar. There's going to be responsibility. Notice that Jesus doesn't say, come to me and I'll eliminate all work from your life. He says, take my yoke upon you. He still uses the imagery of a yoke because a life of discipleship has structure, it has purpose, it has direction, it has things that are better for you and things that are not so good for you and things that are harmful to you. But here's the beautiful gospel nuance. In the ancient world, an experienced ox trained a younger ox. The lead ox did 90% of the lifting, but the young ox might have thought that he was doing it all. But the main ox was doing 90% and training the younger one to do a little more, a little more, a little more, until that was the lead ox training another one. That's the process of discipleship. One person training another to take on the load of discipleship, ministry. Jesus was incredibly active, but was he ever frantic? In the Gospel of Mark, it says immediately, over and over and over, Jesus moved from this to this to this to that, lived a life of purpose, but does it mean that he was frantic? No. He was never frantic that we read of. He was constantly surrounded by demanding crowds, sick people, structural crisis. He moved with an unshakable rhythmic peace. He regularly pulled away to pray. He is the guy that slept in the middle of storms. Why? Because his identity was entirely anchored in the Father's love, not what everybody else thought about him. Because those expectations you won't meet. He modeled the rest for your souls. That's what he offers for us today. So, no, I did not bring animals. I have trouble enough working with inanimate objects. But I did build this. If I can get rid of this. There you go. Ta-da! It's a yoke. Well, actually it's a balance scale. So what we have over here is, here's a few of the good things that you've done this week. Can you think of anything good that you've done this week? Well, you better. It's Sunday. Did you come to church? Yes. You get 2. Anything else you've done good this week?
Yes. Pray.
Pray? Yeah. Yeah. Help people, hopefully, a little bit of that. This is a scale showing what's our worth. How do I decide what I'm worth? So on one side, you can have all the things that you do, right? But on the other side, every single day we start the scale with a heavy, jagged rock. Well, was I successful in my career? What about, was I the type of parent that God would be? What about the other things that we say, the burdens that we put on ourselves? You think of the Old Testament law. How many things did you not do? Did you give to everybody? Do you show kindness to everything? Did you seek God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, every day, every moment? I didn't. But I had a few good things. Right? I wasn't as mean as I could be. What's our worth? And what tips the scale? So why didn't the scale tip? Don't look at the rope. Why didn't the scale tip? What happens when this is your idea of performance? God loves me when? Is that not a crushing weight? And it can feel like it'll just take us down. And no matter what good we do, it's never enough to pull it back. So why didn't it tip? Well, why didn't this tip? Kira says, because of the tension of this rope. So what happens if I take this rope off? What do you expect to happen? At judgment, the scale's going to be loosed, right? And what's going to balance? So if I take this off, so I want to make a point. People assume they think what's going to happen at the end. But they don't know, do they? And they think, well, I'll get away with it because I can balance the scale because I was a Christian, I went to church, I did this, I did that. Thinking that the negative deeds, the unmet expectations that are worth is based on something else. But here's the reality. I have 2 pins in the back of this. And at judgment, the pins are removed. Then what happens? See, you might think you know when you're going to get judged. And you might think the scale didn't move, so I'm okay. But you're not, are you? But what can help the burdens? What do Christians have that's different than the world? Because for the world, this is the expectation. The negative is going to outweigh the positive. And no matter how much positive you put in there, you're never going to weigh out the other. So what we have is Jesus. What happens when you put Jesus here? Who takes the burden? And then what are you worth? It's not the things you put in here. You're worth what you're worth because of that. It took the weight. You might think that you balanced the scale, but you didn't. God took the weight. So it doesn't matter if I put the pins back in now. At judgment, what's going to change? Nothing. Because he took the weight.
Jesus in there.
You got to have Jesus in there. Because otherwise, your faults are what's going to tip the scale. And if this is the scale of justice, all we have is a fearful expectation of judgment. But because of Jesus and the cross, he'll take the weight. And the scale is fine. But not because of what we did, but because of what he did. So if you've not accepted, and we know people that have not accepted Jesus, that's the most important piece of this whole thing. Because maybe you don't have as many rocks as somebody, or maybe you have bigger rocks. It doesn't matter what you put in here. Jesus is the one that balances the scale. So that's my object for this week, and I'm glad that it worked. If we've not accepted Jesus, that's the most important part of life. Because life was not meant to be walked alone. So what do we do with a lesson like this? Well, there's a few things. The scale represents an internal scorecard of the human heart, the way we constantly try to weigh out our worth. Is it this or is it that? Is it the good things? Is it the bad things? Did I meet all the expectations? You can think of your career success, your perfect parenting, comparison, earned guilt, all the things that we can say, that weighs a lot. It weighs on me. Those terms, it weighs on me. So we try to balance the scale by doing more, adding more, but what we're adding is of little value. So what do you try to put on the other side of the scale to even it out? I didn't do as well with this, so I'm going to... See, even that can be a hazard. Thinking that we can even it out by our own good. But what does Jesus offer? To take the weight. To carry the burden. Just like the oxen, he places himself under us to carry it. So what can we do this week? Take an honest inventory of your emotional and mental energy. What's taking your energy? What's the rock of a burden that you carry? Intentionally name it and hand it over to Jesus. refusing to carry its weight alone. It's not that the weight will go, but don't carry it alone. I'm having trouble thinking about this or dealing with this. And Jesus, I know you help. Practice grace-paced no. Break the cycle of frantic busyness. Choose to leave a task unfinished. Intentionally. Because your value is not based on your performance. It's based on His support. So be okay with not being okay. And understand that. Swap your collar in silence. Am I going to be under the yoke of my expectations and burdens, or am I going to be under His yoke? Well, if you take 15 minutes for quiet, uninterrupted reflection, you can take the yoke of that and replace it with His yoke and say, can you lead me through the day? Or thank you for leading me through the day, because I would have gone off track or got into trouble. Shift from performance to partnership. Share your burden. So before you leave church, write down a tangible area where you're ready to stop managing your public image. It bothers me when people think of me this way. Okay, that can bother you. Is it true? You don't have to have it all together. It's okay to know that you need Jesus and to be able to tell people that. Without Jesus, my life would be a mess. But I'm thankful that He provides the structure that's needed. So hopefully the illustration, the lesson, different way of looking at the yoke is helpful to you. Next week we add in the anchor of the storm. We're going to conform to the times of circumstance when we drift completely out of control. What do you do when you're not in control? How do you handle that? And what does Jesus offer? That's what we'll take a look at next week.